Okay, one last time I'll do the housekeeping in case someone new came in since the last time. Um, this is the first time contributor workshop. We're going to be going over some different ways about why we contribute. I'll be sharing techniques on how to find things to contribute to, and then I'll go over the older workflow process of reviewing an issue and creating a patch. And then right after this workshop, Marky is going to go over the new workflow process of the merge requests. If you're looking for general contributions, those are in different rooms, and you can go to the MidCamp page and you'll see all the different links to all the different sprints. There's a general contribution room. Randy Fay is in there, and I think with Matthew. And they'll be helping folks throughout the day set up their machines for local environment. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over how to do these in ways that you don't need a local environment. We'll be looking at how to write a patch, but not using code. So we don't necessarily have to have a local environment to test that because it doesn't show up in the user interface. And I am hard of hearing. So using the chat works really good. I do get into momentum and sometimes I don't see the chat, but just be mindful that if I don't hear you, just if you put a little alert in the chat, that's a good way to tell me that you're saying something. If I'm focusing, I can hear just fine, but sometimes when I'm in the flow and talking to myself, I just don't catch everything. You know, you're here because you want to contribute back to Drupal, which is really great. And I just want to tell folks that I am a non-code developer. You know, I do know some code, but most of the stuff I do in the community doesn't have to do with code. And that's why I think it's important for folks like me to give some of these workshops. So not only coders can follow along, but people who don't have experience with a lot of these things, you know, your traditional roles that are excluded from giving back to Drupal, like human resources or you know, you're in sales and stuff like that. I try to teach in a way that everyone can contribute back because we know that it really feels good when we do that. I'll post the link one more time to the slide deck because I do provide a lot of slides. And there's that. And I'll just get started because the first few slides are kind of fluffy and it gives people time to kind of roll in. My name is Amy June. That's title camel case, never Amy. So if you call out Amy, I might not hear that. So it's always Amy June. I work at Canopy Studios. I am their QA engineer and open source ambassador. Most of the days I just kind of do stuff like this and give back to Drupal and find ways to help initiative leads to do different things. I am a hospice nurse by trade. I've only been doing tech for like 6 years. So I'm really into accessibility because I had firsthand experience how hard it is for folks to use technology. So I help organize sort of a Drupal adjacent meetup space called Accessibility Talks. We meet once a month and talk about things about digital accessibility. And I share that because we have all different kinds of presentations and we have a huge library of resources. So if you want to find out a little bit more about accessibility, it's A11YTALKS, and that's like on Twitter and a website and on YouTube. I do help with core mentoring for Drupal contributions, and I'm a member of the community working group community health team. So I'm pretty active in Drupal. Canopy, I'm throwing in this slide because we're hiring. If you know anyone or are looking for a position, I love my job. We really care about community, all kinds of jobs, Drupal tech leads, accounting, UX, project managers, all different kinds of roles because we've done some reorganizing in the company where people have moved forward and we're looking to fill some of those spaces when people went into more leadership roles. So today, this slide is for the whole workshop. So we're going to be talking about some of these things. We're mostly going to be talking about why we contribute. We're going to talk about how to start contributing to code. We're going to look at the issue queue from like a 1,000-foot view, talk about etiquette, you know, how to create an issue, things like that. And then we'll do some patching and go through the review process a little bit. I do have on here that we're going to chat about pull requests, but we're not. I'm going to tell you what they are, and then Marky's going to talk about them at 11:30 Central Time. So why do we contribute? This is a slide I always use. If you depend on open source depends on you. That's just straight out number one reason. You know, we download for free, we find bugs. It's our sort of obligation to give it back. You know, it prevents redundancy, all kinds of things. And our contributions are really valued. You know, our developers and our makers of Drupal really appreciate when we help them out, because all of us have different perspectives. They don't know how different people are using the software. So it's really important to have the diversity of voices, you know, helping out. Contributing gives you another space in the Drupal community. Not only do you go to camps and meetups to see sessions or the hallway track, but now you can stay that extra day and like contribute on the contribution day. So it sort of sets you up for having, you know, a more to do in Drupal. Do you need to talk your boss into why they should pay you to give back to Drupal? Companies who use Drupal, just like us, you know, they really, really should give back. You know, I see it as good corporate citizenship. You know, it's the value of helping other ones. And I really do think it's a part of our agency's social responsibility to give back to Drupal. But also, like, if a company gives back to Drupal, it kind of creates a natural talent recruitment, because it's fun and rewarding for us as developers and salespeople and whatever role you might have to work with smart people in Drupal. And it's reflected when potential employees, you know, view our agency's page. You know, if giving back to Drupal is important to someone looking for a job, they're going to check out that agency page and see what kind of contributions they are. And one of the ways that that agency can bump their contributions is if they allow that time on company time to give back. And there's definitely benefits of contributing, and I kind of went through this a little bit. You know, it makes you feel good. We really move our project closer to perfection. We can't ever get perfect, but you know, we can definitely improve, because one of our jobs in giving back to Drupal is making it look good. Typos, user interface errors, grammar, all of those things are things that people see when they're evaluating the Drupal projects. If there's a UI with a spelling error or a typo, you know, someone who's looking to maybe build in Drupal or WordPress, they're going to look at that and sort of wonder about things a little bit. So really, every time we fix Drupal, we make it more marketable too. You build your resume by giving back to Drupal. You know, hold on a second. I have a message. Okay. So you build your resume every time you give back to Drupal, and I have a slide that shows us how we do that. And you're more recognizable. You know, the more you're in the issue queue, the more people see your name, the more you sort of network, the more you learn. And then the more you contribute, the more you learn. I came into Drupal not having a lot of coding skills, but every time I teach a workshop, every time I create a patch, every time I work in the issue queue, I learn something new. So I like to say I'm a non-code developer, but as I've worked with Drupal these last 6 years, I've actually learned some stuff. You know, I started in Drupal 7 and now I'm Drupal 8. I understand what a twig file is, you know, so the more you're in there and the more experience you get, you know, the more you learn. And then here's that Drupal.org profile, and I just use Dries. You can see, you know, where he's worked. He's only worked at Acquia, but if it was someone else, you would see all the agencies they worked for. You have a place to have a bio. You can see documentation credits. You can see how long he's been on Drupal.org. You can see what projects he's contributed to in the last year. And then you can see some code commits that he's made over the years. So like I said, when you apply for a job and contributions are important for that agency, they could look at this page and sort of check you out a little bit. Types of contributions. Again, I'm not going to go all through each of them in detail, but I do want to mention some of them. And this is more geared towards that first workshop, but it's really important to know that even in the issue queue, you can still contribute without ever making a merge request or without ever making a patch. There are so many ways to give back to Drupal beyond code, and that includes in the issue queue. So just keep that in mind. Like, don't let your non-code skills or not knowing how to make a patch stop you from working in the issue queue. So I was talking earlier before some people came on that, sometimes that hardest part of giving back to Drupal is actually figuring out what to do. You have maybe 2 hours a week from your agency, or you're doing it on your free time. You don't have the privilege of getting paid to work on it, so you only have an hour here and there. But it takes 25 minutes to find the issue, and it doesn't give you a lot of time to actually work on the issue. So there's some guides in Drupal, and one of them, there's a link here. It's drupal.org/community/community-guide, and I'll look at this with folks after the slide deck. But it's laid out in a way that makes a lot of sense. You can find your role, you can find a task, you can target in on your specific skill area, and then there's different areas of contribution, and they're all listed very clear with links going out to subsequent pages. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I think it's really important to remind folks that our community should really stand against racism. Hate crimes in San Francisco and the Bay Area have gone up since COVID. And I just want to remind folks that, that we should stand against racism. If you want to reach out to me in a PM, I can give you a really good resource on bystander training and things like that. It's a really important issue for me. So I just wanted to hold some space for that this morning. Okay, so contribution can take lots of forms. There's documentation guides, and I'm going to go over a couple of the documentation guides here, because when we get done with the slide deck, I'm going to go through how to contribute exactly to documentation, because it's a lot easier than some folks think. We can work on translations and localizations, sharing your knowledge, writing contributed themes and modules, event organization, promoting the platform, and of course the issue queue, which we're going to go into detail in a bit. So documentation. When I first started, people said, oh, you can start contributing back to Drupal by helping with documentation. I thought, well, how can I contribute back to documentation if I don't know what I'm doing? And it really turned out that I was the perfect person to give back, because if the documentation skipped steps, I knew, because I couldn't figure out how to do it. And it makes sense that you're the perfect person, because it helps the next person out. So if all of us sort of help out with documentation when we're new, it refines that documentation for the next generation. And there's different types of documentation. There's official guides. These are maintained and held to a higher standard. So there's an editorial process involved with these official guides, but they include the Drupal user guide, the evaluator guide, and the local development guide. There's community guides. This is community documentation that can be edited by anyone. And I'll show this in a little bit. There's a couple of different ways you can do it. You can do it through an issue queue. And if you have the right privileges, there's actually an edit button right there on the screen, which is really handy. There's contributor guides. These are the guides that we're going to look at on how to find tasks, where to go to give back. It really helps you figure out how you can bring your unique skills and perspective and join with others in the community. And then there's contribution guides. These are the form of external documentation or Readme within the contributed projects and themes. And we're going to actually do a patch in the issue queue on a Readme. So we're going to do documentation, but in code form. So that'll be the patch we're going to work on today. Translations and localizations, it's a really good way to give back to Drupal. sharing your knowledge, giving presentations, training, mentoring, creating, participating in BOFs like we did yesterday. They do say that sometimes the best way to learn something is to teach it, and I find that true every time I teach a class. Okay, so this is why we're here, kind of getting into the meat and bones of contributing back to code. So what happens in the issue queue? All different kinds of things happen in the issue queue. We report issues, if we have bugs, if we have feature requests, if we have tasks or roadmaps. We create issues in the issue queue. We update issues. Sometimes it takes the form of updating the summary in the issue queue. You visit an issue and you can't figure out what's going on, so you ask for the summary to be updated, and the summary gets updated. You can triage issues. That's the process of going through the issue queue and maybe pulling out issues that are antiquated and old. There's no reason why there should be a Drupal 6 issue up in the issue queue right now. So there's triage. That takes the form of MidCamp is coming up, or DrupalCon is coming up, and going through and tagging issues to work on at particular events. We can create patches and submit pull requests for issues that are active and open that need fixing. Once patches are submitted, we can provide useful feedback in the form of steps to replicate, steps we did to validate, screenshots. Testing, there's always a need to write testing in the Drupal issue queue. I don't know too much about testing, but Matt Glayman on Thursday did some Night Watch review, and that'll be up on the MidCamp YouTube space, I think. If not, then you can pull in one of the organizers and we'll give you the link. But testing is always being asked for in the issue queue. And then general collaboration, because some issues are ideas and they want people's input on what to give back. So you can see there's not just creating a patch and doing a merge request. There's all different kinds of things that happen in the issue queue. Now I do a disservice if I didn't talk about they're not two different issue queues, but they are in a way. There's core, and then there's contributed modules and themes. Drupal.org is where most code that makes the Drupal site work, including the core project, and all Drupal websites run on a version of core. What makes the website different are the contributed modules that are added, and they're often referred to as contrib. And you can pick and choose from a wide range of contributed modules. They add functionality to your site, and then themes add, they change your site's appearance. Distributions provide features and functions for a specific type of site, which includes a single download containing the core software, and then some pre-configured configuration when it comes to modules and themes. And really, I use the word module. And what is a module? Some people might not know. It's a set of files that could include PHP, JavaScript, CSS. And again, that extends your site's features and adds functionality. So issue queue 101, we often hear, the word issue queue, but what is it? I like to encourage first-time contributors to start small and work their way up. And that can be starting with triage, like I said, making sure the issues are still relevant and that there's enough steps to validate or replicate. Tagging issues again, this a lot of stuff I already went over, but there's also applying patches. It's pretty straight. I'm not going to use the word easy because easy is relative, but it's pretty straightforward how to apply a patch in a Git repository. And then there's also Simply Test Me, which is an online browser-based local environment, and I'm going to give a little demo of that too. We can re-roll patches and we can update summaries in the issue queues too. And what kind of issues are worth reporting? Well, this slide is the same information on the last slide, which isn't true, but really the issues that are worth reporting are all of them, because if our software developers don't know how we're using them, they can't improve upon it. They might have a certain story that they tell themselves as they develop, but we all use Drupal differently. We all have our edge cases. So if you have a Drupal site running and you have, views bulk operations, and you have meta tag, and you have this, and some combination somewhere makes it break, that's important. You might not think so because it's an edge case, using contributed modules, but there might be 4, 5, 6, 1,000 more people who have that same configuration that you don't know of. So reporting those issues and having those patches up there for other people is super valuable. And it sort of eliminates that redundancy because you've already worked on it. So providing that patch for someone else, they don't have to work on it again. And you found you have a bug, you have an idea, you have a feature request. The first thing we need to make sure is that it doesn't already exist in that issue queue. We don't want to duplicate efforts. So the first thing we'll do when we start working is I'll show you how to do an advanced search and find if the issue already exists. But if it does already exist, we want to make sure that we update that summary with any changes that might happen. Reporting similar findings is super important because it validates that the bug is replicatable. And then for the next people, we want to add steps to replicate and steps to validate as well if the issue already exists. Again, sometimes finding an issue is the hardest part. Try using the advanced search feature. And like I said, I'll show this when we do the demo. The advanced search option really just sort of hones in on everything. And then this is, when you open the issue queue, the advanced search button is something that you have to select. And when you select it, it opens up some more choices. And for those that might not be able to see my screen, I want to go over this picture a little bit. You can see here that there are some fields you can use to kind of refine your search. Search for is good. When we talk about how to create an issue, we'll talk about why we need succinct titles, and it's for searching. We want to make sure that our titles are easily searchable for the next person. Say you're working at a contrib day and you can't remember what the issue was, but you remember who submitted it. You can search by who submitted an issue. You can search by who's following an issue. Your coworker said, oh, I'm following this issue in Drupal, but you can't remember the issue. That's okay. You know their username. You can refine your search to only issues that need review. You have some time, you don't have enough time to write a patch, but you have time to review. You can search by version. So Drupal wants to make it easy to contribute. As new users, I do have some suggestions on things to stay away from because things can get complicated and muddy really quick, and sometimes we can just avoid those things. I do tell beginners to pass on contributed projects that aren't actively maintained, and I'll show folks how to do that when we look at the issue queue. Projects that have lots of open issues. Now, this can be subjective because you could have something like meta tags that has hundreds of issues, but it's also a project that's used on tons of websites. But if it's, one of those sort of obscure modules, or maybe it's only installed on a couple of hundred sites, be aware of the issue queue having lots of issues open. That kind of is a signal that the maintainers aren't really active in there. If you see lots of issues in there that were marked won't fix, sometimes that's an indication that the maintainer doesn't really want a lot of collaboration when it comes to feature requests and stuff. So if you have a feature request, be mindful of that. Stay away from individual issues with tons and tons of comments. I used to say stay away from issues that have over 100 comments, but other contributors will maybe say 10 for a beginner. And this comes into this next point, these next two of issues that have changed status lots of times and issues with disagreements. So if you see an issue queue and you see it, an active disagreement between folks, sometimes as a novice, it's best just to sort of steer clear of those issues and find an issue where it's really straightforward. There's one roadmap, there's one plan. And then be mindful of issues that have just changed status a lot of times. You know, it's marked active, it's marked needs review, and there's a lot of nitpicking. So that might be an indication that the summary isn't up to date, or it's not clear how to fix that. So as a beginner, just be very mindful and read those comments through before committing that time to a project. So we're going to create an issue and want to talk about the different metadata that's involved. We want to make sure, this is a screenshot of a picture of the top of an issue, kind of the summary and what it looks like. You can see that this is a fixed issue on the sidebar there. You can see the version. You can see the component is user interface. It's a feature request. We can see who assigned it, who the reporter is, when it was created, when it was updated. But we really want to be mindful of that title. When we create an issue, we want to be descriptive and concise. We want our title to not be aggressive or accusatory. We want it to be straightforward and nice. You know, the category, is it a bug report? Is it a feature request? Are you asking for support? These are drop downs. Priority, you know, you can select critical, your site is a white screen of death, or, you know, you just can't get anywhere. That might be a critical bug, a major, minor, or normal. The status is important. You know, when we create an issue, we usually just leave it as active. But as the issue moves around, someone submits a pull request or a patch, so they mark it needs review. Someone's reviewed it, the patch needs some work. So there's all different kinds of status changes that can happen in the life cycle of an issue. Version is important when reporting a bug, because not every version might have that bug. So if you're using a contributed module and it's, you know, 1.2, but the bug isn't on 1.3, we want to make it clear what version of that bug is on. And component. This dropdown varies across projects because the maintainers have the ability to add what components are worked on. So you could see a component dropdown that's very sparse. It might say code, documentation, user interface, and tests. But another, if you ever like open up the Drupal component, you know, it's a mile long. You've got all different kinds of components. You know, you have Ajax, you have JavaScript. So this will vary from project to project. And then tags. Tags are used to help people search, and we'll create a tag when we create an issue. And then the summary. Again, the summary is really important. Within the last 6 months, they've gone back to injecting a template into the issue queue, which is really nice. It gives us some headings and reminders of different things that we should report when we fill out an issue. So here's what that looks like in the user interface. You can see most of this stuff is required. So it'll remind you if you forget to fill out one of these fields. This is for an issue if you want to create on Drupal.org itself, you know, the website. So you can see the component list is rather short. You can see that issue tags is a field, and that's an autocomplete field. And I don't know if I'm going to mention this later, so I'll mention it now. Issues tags. The issue tag you're looking for is 98% guaranteed that it's already been created. So be very mindful when filling out this issue tag field. Let it autocomplete and see what comes up. About a year and a half ago, they went through the tags and they found, like, I'm just going to throw out an example. Accessibility was spelled wrong 3 times. So try not to create your own tags, you know, just let them autocomplete. And the exception might be when we tag for an event like MidCamp 2021. The first time that tag didn't exist. So we had to write out MidCamp 2021, but now it already exists and will autocomplete for folks. Just make sure, you use that template that's injected. There's problem motivation, there's proposed resolution, there's remaining tasks, there's UI and API changes, and there's data model changes. And it's okay that you don't know what all of those mean. I do. I don't typically use the last two that I've listed. I'll delete those, or I'll put, non-applicable. And that steps to reproduce, and I want to clarify a little bit. We really want to make sure that we give enough context to the person who's reviewing the issue or creating the patch. Give URLs and breadcrumbs. Just be very clear with those steps to replicate. That way, there's no question as to what the problem is. So tooling and documentation, these are mostly links and just some ideas to throw at folks that these things are available for us. Again, Randy's available in the general contrib space. He will help folks if you want to get Drupal up and running on your local machine, but some useful tools, of course. Drush, of course, is very useful. Git, you don't necessarily have to know Git, but writing a patch and reviewing a patch using Git, again, is pretty straightforward. And Git, for those that might not know, it's a version control system. Composer, it's a dependency manager for PHP. We should all be using Composer for Drupal 8, 9, and 10. So make sure that you get on board with getting that installed on your machine. And then just having a basic text editor or IDE. You don't need an IDE. There's a learning curve that comes with it. You can start out with the basic bare bones editor like BB Edit, which used to be Text Wrangler. But then there's kind of halfway in betweens like Sublime or TextMate or Atom. And then you can if you really need that IDE with that integrated development environment, there's tools like PHP Storm and others. Simply Test Me, again, it's a online service that provides on-demand sandboxes. You can test modules without a remote version of Drupal using this tool. You can also test any patches using advanced options. The screenshot, you can see there's an advanced options, but you can't see the bottom, but you can add a URL to test a patch. Important note, when you use Simply Test Me, right now it doesn't always work. We are actively working on the project. We are getting it up and running on the Tugboat framework, and Matt Glayman's been helping us out, and he's been doing these really neat sort of streaming. He works and streams working on Simply Test Me. I think he does that every other Sunday. But be mindful that it doesn't always work. So I just want to point that out to new beginners. But we are working on a more stable version, and hopefully by DrupalCon, we won't have to say that it doesn't always work anymore. Details for Simply Test Me, you click on a button, it spins up a sandbox, it pops open a Drupal site, you come into the login screen. That admin is your username and password, just so everyone knows that. If you're like, oh no, what do I do? It's admin. And what's nice about Simply Test Me is it provides a URL. You can share that URL with someone across the country, across the continent, across the globe. So if you mock up a little a website and you want to share it with someone, like you're doing marketing or you have some configuration that you want to share, that URL is shareable, which is super nice. Tugboat Qa, it's an automated on-demand deployment. It's previews in the issue queue. It was just in core, but I think maybe last week or 2 weeks ago, it's now available in the contrib issue queue too. So this is very exciting. And what this does, the previews really accelerate development. it automates the environments and kind of bridges that technical divide and brings the ability to review changes to more users in the issue queue. And Mark will go over this a little bit more. But Tugboat reduces frictions by making the changes visible. So if you don't have that local environment, you can use the Tugboat preview system in the issue queue. Dreditor is, and all of these slides are wrong, I apologize. But Dreditor is an extension for Drupal that enhances the user experience and functionality in the issue queue. Dreditor is short for Drupal editor. They are not actively maintained, but when we do the demo, you might see some buttons in the issue queue that you don't see in your own, and it's because I use this Dreditor extension. And I think it's only available on Chrome and sometimes Firefox. And then here's some useful links, you know, /doc/documentation. There's api.drupal.org /community. You know, again, guides are pretty much for everything. The API guide allows you to search the complete API for Drupal. And for those who might not be familiar, API stands for Application Programming Interface. API, yeah, Application Programming Interface. I don't say it enough to like have it like roll off the top of my tongue. But the API includes things way back before Drupal 5 through the current version. So if you're working on core code and you want to start developing modules, it's sort of an indispensable link for you to have. /community is the community hub. You know, there's all different kinds of things. There's the Drupal working group, core governance, security working group, technical working group. This documentation pages around the community. And there's also, it was called the Getting Involved Guide, but it might be called Contribution Guide. And we'll look at that. The name just recently changed, so I'm unclear what it is. And then, you know, Drupal Stack Exchange, you know, if you're a developer and just want some nice forums to look at, Drupal Stack Exchange is very valuable. Oh, I also have drupal.org/project/Drupal. What that is that's Drupal core. But I want to share the naming convention because when we talk about contributed themes and modules, it follows that naming convention. It would be drupal.org/project/meta-tag, drupal.org/project/bootstrap paragraphs. So it all follows that naming convention. And I'm going to go kind of step by step before going into a demo, just to sort of show that the process is straightforward. You know, there's not a whole lot of steps involved. So the patch process, really, you know, it boils down to you have a problem. You file an issue, you know, make sure you provide all that metadata. You, well, sometimes the issue already exists, but, you know, once the issue exists, you download the repository onto your machine, you create a new branch, and this is the patch process. You create a new branch, you make the changes on the new branch, you, compare the two branches and provide a diff file, and that's creating a patch. And then you upload the patch to drupal.org. So I'm just going to say that one more time really simply. You find a problem, you file an issue, you download the repository on your machine, you create a new branch, you work on that branch and commit your changes, you compare the two branches to make the patch, and you upload the patch to drupal.org. So that's the process in a nutshell. The review process looks very similar to the patching process, just a little bit differently. You found an issue that has a patch, you download the repository onto your machine, you download the patch, that's a little bit separate process, but pretty straightforward. You apply the patch. The two ways I'm going to show today is using Simply Test Me, or you can apply it locally in your Get repository. And then you if you have a local environment running, you would review the user interface. If it's a user interface patch, but say it's just like the README, like we're going to work on, you would look at the code and review that, and then you would provide useful feedback. So again, download the repository, download the patch, apply the patch a couple of different ways, review the code, and then provide useful feedback, and you change that metadata depending on that. I wanted to show a little bit of a picture of Dreditor because this is an extension that really helps for new contributors. It's got a few different bonus features, which are really nice. It provides a color-coded diff file. How wonderful is that? Because if you do review a patch on Drupal.org, it's usually just white with text, or however you have your settings in your browser, with just pluses and minuses. And it's really hard sometimes, especially if that patch is over multiple files, to review all of it. But when you have Dreditor, it provides that color-coded, green lines have been added, red lines have been removed. So it makes it really easy to review code. It also allows you to use a dialog box. So if there's a piece of code, like say line 18, that doesn't look right, I'd select row 18 and this dialog will open up. And in that dialog, it allows you to enter code comments. So you can say line 18 has an extraneous space at the end of it. And then you would hit save. And then when you go back into the issue queue, your code comment is injected in the next comment for you. It's a really handy tool. And I'll show that. And then again, Mark is going to be showing this at 11:30, but issue forks and merge requests, again, a pretty straightforward process. It emulates the work process that we use on GitHub if you're a developer and use that workflow day to day. You create a fork, you get push access, you use Git branches, and you commit and push changes. Pretty straightforward. I do not use that development workflow, so it's not straightforward for me. And it might not be straightforward with how you collaborate in the issue queue, and that's what Mark's going to go over with us. And I just want to note, I'll just read this for ADA. While project maintainers may not require patches and can handle merging and testing themselves with Get remotes, non-maintainers trying to test an issue can still be greatly helped by a patch file. Patch files also allow for faster delivery of changes across multiple test environments. And that's straight from an article on Drupal.org. And that's why we're still teaching this patch process a bit. And that's the end of the formal presentation. So we'll move into a demo now. I am going to take a couple drinks of water. I do want to just mention that MidCamp is always the camp right before DrupalCon. So we like that people come and get acquainted with how to do the patching, how to do the merge requests, and get their local environments up and running. So that way, when DrupalCon starts in a few weeks, we'll be ready to go. And DrupalCon this year is going to be a little bit different in regards that there's a huge focus on contributions. So DrupalCon days are shorter. It's 4 hours of your traditional session and content delivery and keynotes in the morning, but all afternoon, each day of the week will be initiatives. So not only will they be working on initiatives, but other contribution stuff too. And I do want to let people know that you do not need to buy a DrupalCon ticket to participate in the code contributions. It's a separate entity. We're working, I think on Monday, the core mentors are getting together and we're going to work out what the platform's going to be like. So there'll be more information next week on the DrupalCon website about how to participate in the contributions. But I do want to stress, you don't need to buy a ticket to contribute on contribution day. And little known fact, you don't need to buy a ticket to go to DrupalCon when it's in person to go to Contrib Day. You can still go to a facility that's hosting DrupalCon and be able to contribute in those contribution spaces without a ticket. So be mindful of that. If like the $800 ticket when it goes back to real life is that barrier, but you're really into contributing, you don't need that ticket. You know, you can just go there and contribute and hang out and do all of those fun things. You just don't have access to that session delivery. Okay, so that is the end of the formal presentation. So I'm going to hit stop share. And I'm gonna breathe and take a drink. And I have to answer a Slack, and then I'll do a little bit of a demo. We do have a core mentor in the Olivero room. So when we're done here, if people want to, okay, wait, that's a private message. I don't want to say that out loud. Okay. So after this workshop, there's the merge request, but if you want to, stick around and see Marky's, okay, I'm talking too fast. I just said the same thing twice in my brain and once out loud, and I don't know where I am. So I'm going to reset. After this workshop, there'll be the merge request, but Randy from DDev will be around all day in the general contribution room for local environments. And then Matthew, who's a core mentor, is in the Olivero room if you want to take on some novice issues working on the Olivero theme, which is now in core. So there's a space in that Olivero room if you want to kind of extend what we're going to go through on the demo. And Matthew will walk, kind of, I don't want to say hand in hand, but he's a really valuable resource, a really good teacher on helping us figure out how to do it on our own. So I'm going to close some tabs because it's embarrassing. And I'm going to share a different screen now. And I am going to share a screen which has my notes. So this is a no judgment zone, everybody. I just want to say that out loud because my notes aren't always written in a way that other people understand, but I understand. And sometimes it's easier to have my notepad open and show folks what's going on because we all make mistakes. We all do things a little bit differently. And it's been known to happen that I forget one step of the process. And so me going through it, having my notes open is an honest look at how we do things. And it also allows collaboration and troubleshooting if something goes wrong. Okay, so let me share my screen. I'm a big fan of troubleshooting because you never know what goes wrong. And so if you go to a workshop and something goes wrong, you're like, oh, then if it happens to you, you're like, oh, we saw that in the workshop. I know how to fix that. I used to be really self-conscious when something didn't go right. And then I realized that all of those are like really good learning opportunities. Just have to switch your mindset a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to share my big screen. Okay. So here is this contributor guide, and I'll put the link in the chat. This contributor guide is sort of a real good diving board when maybe this is your very first time or you're relatively new, haven't done a whole lot. It kind of breaks things down by task, we can look at one of these just for an example, find a task. The filters are pretty nice, for experienced, event planning, temporary, some of these still need to be fleshed out because this is a new set of documentation, but it gives you, a different idea of different things that you can do, like create a patch for an issue. Then it gives you specific instructions. So that page I like to suggest to people to look at when you have like about an hour to sort of learn and kind of do that bumper car thing where you go from link to link to link to link and just sort of bump around and explore the set of pages quite a bit. It's very interesting and intriguing, all the different things there are to work on. We're not going to go through too much of it just because I just want to point out that this exists and it's a good resource. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to find a bug. Because of time and whatever, I already know what we're going to do. I help maintain the Smart Trim module. And if I spelled it right, that would be fantastic. So the Smart Trim module, I'm going to go through what a project page looks like. Again, you know, there's that Drupal.org /project/smart trim, that nomenclature for finding a project page. So here, and when we look at some of these pages, if you follow along, my pages might look slightly different just because I might have an extended privilege or something like that. So don't think there's anything wrong with your browser or your account or anything. I just want to let folks know I might have a different tab, or I might have a different edit button that other folks might not have. So the Smart Trim module, this is the project page. You can see that they provide a description of the module. You can see who helps support it. You can see how many sites are actively using this module. That's pretty good data if you're reviewing a module to use on your, the sun's in my eyes, reviewing a module for your own website and project. On this side block, you can see, you know, when the last commit was made a month ago. So this is an actively maintained project. You can see there's a link here for the issue queue. You know, it gives you some statistics. And each of these project pages have these. Documentation, if there's an external documentation guide, you'll find links here. There's resources. There's this development column, and this is pretty handy because there's a link to view the code repository. So you can view the code repository on GitLab without having to download it on your machine. So if we want to look at that, we can go in here and we can kind of poke around and look and see what this issue or what this project is all about. I just want to show that little thing. You can see down here that there's a Drupal 7 version and there's a Drupal 8 version. And we can see that it was last released, you know, May of 2020, but we can see from over here that it's still being actively worked on. Remember, I talked about trying to keep to actively maintained modules. So if I select this here, I'm taken to the issue queue. The issue queue, and I'm going to give kind of a broad 1,000-foot view of the issue queue. The issue queue, you can see, is sort of color-coded. It's also, for those that might not be able to see the colors relate to where the issue is in the life cycle of the issue. So you can see there's needs review, you can see there's active, some are postponed. You can see, you know, when it was last, when the issue was last updated, when it was created, anybody who's assigned to it, what version. So this is a great way to just sort of scroll. If you don't want to take the time to scroll, you can click this advanced search issue or link, and it opens up that advanced search function that we saw. Again, you know, say we're looking for issues for MidCamp. I'm going to create MidCamp, and I'm going to look, and I can search the issue queue for MidCamp. It looks like the documentation guide is tagged for MidCamp. I don't want to work on that, but that's how you would find, you know, like if you're going to go help with the Olivero theme, you could search the core code base for Olivero. You know, you can, you know, select the category and you would hit MidCamp, and you can see all the different issues that people are working on. But we're going to reset this. But what we're going to work on today is we're actually going to, and we're not going to do the whole thing. I'm just going to do the patching process really quick just to show what it's about. This README, and I know because I have the experience behind it, is not Drupal standards. This README provides information, but we really want contributed modules and themes to follow the README template guide for that specific version. Because when people evaluate our projects, they want to go to a README and expect the same information in the same layout as the last project README they went to. Consistency is super important. It's a coding standard. Just because it's documentation doesn't mean it's any less of a coding standard. So I do have a link to the template page. And what this does is it basically just kind of goes through and shows you what the template's supposed to look like. We can see, sorry for the scroll, there's supposed to be a table of contents, an introduction that provides some useful information about what the project's about. If the module requires anything beyond Drupal core, if there's any recommended modules that work well with it. Installation processes, you can see there's a different link for Drupal 7 than Drupal 8. You should provide a configuration section, an optional troubleshooting section, and then a maintainer section. So if I scroll down here, here's an example of a README, what a README is supposed to look like. So most READMEs on Drupal.org across Drupal.org or Drupal core and contributed projects follow this format. You know, we can see that table of contents, we can see all the different things, but if we go to our Smart Trim module, we don't have any of those. So what I want to do is I want to start the template for somebody else. So I'm going to create an issue about bringing this up to coding standards, and then we're going to create a patch. And we're not going to finish the whole README, but I'm going to start a patch just so we can see the process. And then I'm going to mark it needs work. So the next person who comes in can download that patch, which is a template, and work from there. Straightforward. Okay. So if we remember back, we found an issue. So we want to create an issue. So first thing we want to do is go back to that issue queue for Smart Trim. And remember, we want to search to make sure it doesn't exist. So we're going to use some keywords. So I'm going to use the keyword README. These are closed, so I'm not going to look at those. Documentation guide, that's not the same. Documentation guide is external. It's not internal within the project. Okay, something else I might want to search is documentation. So if I search for documentation, we don't see anything. So I'm pretty confident the issue doesn't exist. Remember, that's the first thing. Make sure it doesn't already exist. So now that it doesn't already exist, I'm going to select this create new issue. Be very mindful if you're reporting a security issue, you do not report a security issue in the main issue queue because that alerts everybody that there's a security issue. So there is always a different link, process and procedure for security issues. Super important. Okay, moving on. Ours is not a security issue. So we're going to have a short, concise, not accusatory title. So we're going to say, README does not follow Drupal documentation standards. So we've got two keywords in there that I searched for, README and documentation. The project is Smart Trim, that auto-populates for us. The category, it's a task. The priority is, it's minor. Let's not fool ourselves. It's not super important. It's important. I'm not going to devalue documentation. Documentation is important, but this is a minor issue. We're going to leave it as active, but you can see as you work through issues, the different statuses that are available. Our version, we're going to select the latest version. We're going to select the development version because we want them to, move forward with this. If it was a bug, we could, select which one. But when you're like really doing a feature request or updating a coding standard, we want that to get into the development version. Component, this one is documentation. It's not quite code, it's not an external documentation guide, but it's documentation. And sometimes you might not know where it fits. Just sort of use your best guess, because the next person can update that issue. Remember when we talked about triaging issues? This is something that people can go back and update if they see fit. Assigned, if you are working on core, please don't assign yourself an issue. But if you're working on contrib, you can't. I'm a maintainer of this project, so I see other people's names, but you would just see your own. I know for a fact that in the next 5 minutes, I'm going to be working on this. So I'm going to assign it to myself. Okay. And that's sort of the guideline. Are you going to be working on it? Issue tags, I'm going to add a couple. I'm going to add documentation. I'm going to let it autocomplete. I'm going to add the novice tag because this is for beginners. Allow it to autocomplete. I'm also going to add the MidCamp tag because we are at MidCamp and we like to track what we work on in MidCamp. So we're going to do the MidCamp 2020. I do see that I'm at 9:10, so please allow a little bit of flexibility. We're probably going to go over that 11:15 mark, so forgive me.
Amy, June, can I interrupt you? Sorry.
Sure.
Just a quick question. Did you say for core issues, don't assign it to yourself?
Typically not.
Okay.
What I would do is I would, in a comment, because when we work on issues, best practices is to review the comments that are happening. So I would, if you're working on an issue, I would make a comment that says, I am actively working on this issue. Here is what I am doing in the core queue. That's what I would do. Because core, I've been told that it's more about the maintainers assigning it to other people. Like once it goes from like it needs a patch to a needs a test, or if it's like a UI component and someone's designated to work on that specific component or initiative, they'll assign it to that person. That's my understanding of the assigned feature in Drupal core. So, but I like to do this my fear is redundancy and replication of efforts. So that's why I always like either assign myself. And then also to tag on to that, if you get lost and you have a fire at work and your kids are out of control and you can't work on this for a few days or a week, go back and unassign yourself and make a comment that says, I'm unassigning myself. I just, whatever, didn't have the time. This is what I have so far. That way that helps the next person, because when you assign yourself, people are going to be like, oh, I'm not going to work on that because someone else is working on it. So be very clear in your comment what you're doing, who you are. Just, it's all about collaboration. And sometimes the only documentation for the collaboration is in the issue queue. So just be very transparent. So I'm going to grab that link to the template, snag it, and I'm going to problem and motivation. Readme does not follow documentation standards. Please visit this page for the template. Steps to reproduce, they aren't really applicable here, because it's just in the README. There's no user interface, but if there was a user interface thing, make sure you have, I selected configuration, administration, breadcrumbs, and all of those steps. Proposed resolution, provide a patch that follows the template. Remaining tasks, we're going to say we need patch and review. User interface changes, there's none. API changes, none. Data model changes, none. And feel free to delete those if you want. Feel free to delete the whole summary if you want. These are sort of just easy reminders for us to what we should include when we report an issue. I'm going to come down here. Parent issue, if it's a bigger issue, and this is like little sub issue. Say there's something related, this is where you would put the URL for those issues. Files, that's more like if you had a screenshot, if it was a user interface thing, you want to provide a screenshot of the bug. Say you're doing collaboration later and you have a text document you want to share, that's where you would upload the file. And we don't want to change any of this other stuff, so we're going to look one more time just to make sure we have all of the things, and I'm going to hit save. So what this does is it creates a unique node on Drupal.org specific to this. So we can see that there's this unique node number. That's valuable to me, and I'm going to use that in a little bit. So I have a notepad. That's not it. I also have a Zoom window that is in the way no matter where it is. So I have that node number, which I want to save because we use our naming conventions for patches rely on that node number. Okay, so we created the issue. And remember, our next step is we want to download the repository on our machine. We want to create a new branch, work on that new branch, and then create a diff file. So let's do that. So if we go back to, I'm going to close some of these because tabs, but not that one. We want to go back to the Smart Trim module, and we want to download the repository. And remember, on that project page, we can go over here and we can view code repository. But if we go over here to this version control tab and select it, what that does is it's some text that lets us know how to download a repository onto our machine, how to create a patch, how to do a couple of different things. So that version control tab is super handy. It's like a little bit of documentation that's always there on the project pages for us. So setting up the repository, I am going to snag this command. I'm going to open my terminal, and I need to find it. So here on my terminal, I'm going to make sure I am someplace safe. PWD is present working directory. You can see where you are. I'm going to change directories. I'm going to go into my desktop because my desktop is fairly clean. So it's going to be easy for me to find this stuff. So I'm going to go into my desktop. I'm going to snag this command. I'm going to paste it in, hit return. And what that's doing is it's cloning the Smart Trim repository onto my machine, onto my desktop. And then the second command, cd smart trim, changes that directory, and now I'm in that repository. So if I do that pwd, present working directory, I can see that I'm in my desktop in the Smart Trim window. Okay, so that next step is we want to create a patch, or create a branch. So what I like to do is I like to name my branch how I would name a ticket, and that issue number is a ticket number in a way. So I'm going to create a branch with that unique node number -2, and that 2 is the anticipated comment number where I'm going to paste this patch. So if I'm working in the issue queue and the next comment is 3, I would put -3. If the next open comment is 4, I would put -4. So it's the anticipated comment number where you will paste the patch. And it's okay if you don't name your branch this way. You can name your branch anyway, but I name my branch because I'm going to name my patch the same thing. And you know what? If someone goes in and writes another comment, it's really easy to change your file name. So this isn't set in stone, but this is the normal naming convention for patching, is the issue number and the anticipated comment number. So with that being said, I am going to create a branch, and I copy and paste because I don't work in the issue queue every day, let's be honest. And I'm already lost because I have too many tabs open. So I'm just going to keep this training tab open. I'm going to go to my issue. I'm going to do get checkout -B because that is how I create a branch. I am now on a new branch. So I'm going to open my text editor, which is Sublime. I am going to do open space period. And what that does is it opens my present working where I am in my binder. And what I can do is I can just drag this into my Sublime. But I have too many screens in the way. I drag it into Sublime and it opens it up. So we're on that new branch. We're going to look at the README. We're going to look at that README template. We're going to see that we need a table of contents and stuff like that. For the sake of brevity, I already have the template up. So I'm going to copy and paste that. I'm going to go into my Sublime. I'm going to absolutely change everything, because what this is it's an example on how to create a patch. You can see I filled out the template pretty nice. We have the table of contents. We have a blank template so people can fill in this information. We can see all of this in brackets for things that people need to do. I've started the configuration for people. So this is going to be like a Drupal ladder project. So we're going to put this patch up on Drupal.org, and then the next people can work on the README. Does that make sense? So normally you would supply the whole README. It takes about, I don't know, half an hour, hour and a half, depending on how complex the module is to create a README from scratch. But we're not going to do that. And because me and Mark maintain this module, we're okay with it being worked on incrementally on these contrib days.
You
right,
should
Mark?
probably put your name in there too under maintainers.
Well, someone else can do that the next time.
Okay, that's actually a good. That's a good. I'm glad that you actually created this ticket, so now I have a ticket to do my talk on.
That's why I did it, actually.
Otherwise, I would make a dummy ticket. So glad.
No, that's why I did it. It's for the ladder, and we're going to go a little bit over, Mark, because
no rush.
Okay, because I talk a lot, but you know that.
Oh, I know.
So we have this template up now. Like I said, if we were really doing this, you know, in real life, we would make sure we fill on all these things. We would test the links. We would open it up in Simply Test Me. We would make sure that the configuration process is right, but brevity. So we're going to hit save. And now what we're going to do is we're going to create that patch. And remember, the patch is the difference between the two branches. So we had that first branch we downloaded and that second branch we created. So if I go into my notes, we can, is that the same number? Yeah, okay. So I have my naming convention right here. So our naming convention is the project name. So we're going to do Smart Trim. We have the fix, which is a short description, and we're going to say README. We're going to do the issue number. Sorry, we're all over the place. And then we're going to do that anticipated comment number. So here's what we're going to name the patch. We're going to name it Smart Trim, which is the name of the project. If you're working on core, that would be Drupal. That is really for you. So if you work on different projects from time to time, it's a quick way, like if you keep things in a patch folder, it's quick to identify. It's just for you to reference later. And then that short description, which is README, the unique node number, -2.patch. Now a .patch file is the same as a .diff. So that's our patch name. So knowing that, we're going to copy that. And we're going to create what we're going to do, and this is copy and pasted, so I'm going to explain this. We're going to do a Git Diff, and we're going to have the first branch. And if we go back into our terminal, we can do get branch, and we can see the name of our first branch. So I'm going to copy that. And then we see the name of our second branch. So what I want to do is I want to create a file that compares the two branches, but I've missed a step. Does anyone know what that step is? I need to commit my changes to the repository. So for those that might not know, Get is version control. So you need to make sure that you add it to the Git repository. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a Get status and make sure there's changes. Yes, we've modified the README. We're going to do a Get add. Sorry, Mike Anello, period. He says never to do Get add period, but this is only one file. What a period does is it adds all of the files. We're only adding one, so period is safe. So we're going to Get add period. We're going to do a Get commit -m. And I really do suggest that you follow your muscle memory and do your commit messages the same way you do everything else. And for me, it's the ticket number and the change. And we'll spell fix right. Okay, so we're going to commit these changes. We're going to do a get status just one more time because that's, if we spell it right, get status. And we can see that our working tree is clean. So we have a clean repository. So now we're going to do that diff between the two files. So we're going to do, and I like to say this a lot of times for just memory, a get diff is comparing the two branches. We have our first branch, the 8 branch, and then we have our branch that we created, and we're going to put it, we're going to write it into a file that we have named smart trim -readme -issue number. So it's smart trim readme, that unique node number, our anticipated comment number .patch. So I'm going to copy that, put it in there, and then hopefully there it is. And what I like to do is I like to look at the patch to make sure it's not empty, because I am notorious for uploading an empty patch. So here's our file. It looks right. You know, we took out all that information. You can see what we've added. So now we're going to go back to our issue queue. We're going to indicate that we want someone to review our patch. I am going to unassign myself because best practices is you don't review your own code. And I'm going to make a comment that I have uploaded a patch with only the template. And because I am not a novice, I should not be working on this issue. I make it very clear that I'm in a first-time contributor workshop doing a demo for transparency, because we really want novice contributors to work on novice issues. So if someone goes in there and says, well, Amy June has 10,000 commits, what's she doing writing, doing a review on a README? I like to provide that clarification, because really that novice tag is really for novices. And with saying that, if you are a novice and you're working on that, feel free to tell people in the issue queue, this is the first time I've ever reviewed a patch. This is the third patch I've ever submitted. It gives you a little bit more grace. I hate to say that, but it allows maintainers and people to collaborate to know that you are a beginner, and they'll really help you out. I am demoing the patch process at MidCamp using this issue as a learning project. Okay. And then if I scroll down, you can change the summary if it needs to be changed, which we don't need to do. We're going to add our file. And remember, we just put it on our desktop. We did smart trim And there's my file. Here's another way to kind of review and make sure it's not empty before you upload it. We're going to hit open, upload. You will not see this line here, but what you will see here, attribute this contribution. If you're volunteering your own time, select the box. If Canopy is paying for you, you select this box. It kind of is just a metric for Drupal.org to see how people work on the issue queue, when they work on it, and who's paying for development. So be mindful that that's available. And I kind of review it and I hit save. And now it spins a couple of times and it's changed the status to needs review. And just quickly before Marky starts, I want to show that Dreditor added these buttons in my issue queue. If I was to regularly look at this issue or this patch, it would open up a really hard to read patch, right? And how I opened that was I right-clicked it. If I wanted to save the patch on my machine, I would just hit Save As. Going back here, that Dreditor button, it opens up in a color-coded diff file. If I wanted to make a comment, I select the thing, I write needs work, hit save, hit paste, and now that second or that third comment, it injected what I wrote in that window, which is super handy. Back up here, Dreditor also allows a Simply Test Me button, and what that does is it opens Simply Test Me, and it pre-populates all the information for us. We're working on Smart Trim. We indicated we wanted to work on the dev version. It pre-populated that patch, but say you needed to add another patch, you would just hit, add a patch. You go back to that patch URL and you snag that. Obviously, it's the same one, so we wouldn't do it, but that's how you would add another patch. And then you just hit Launch Sandbox. It may or may not spin up. We'll have to see, but I'm going to let Marky take over. So just to iterate, what we did was we found an issue. We created an issue on Drupal.org. We used that version control tab and we downloaded the repository onto our machine. We created a new branch. We made some fixes, committed those changes, and then we compared those two branches to make a diff file. And then we went back to the issue, unassigned ourselves, attached the patch, and made a comment, and we changed it to needs review. So that's sort of the patching process in a whole. And then we kind of saw Simply Test Me. We're spinning up an environment. What I'll do is I'll paste this URL in the chat, and people can come back and look at it. And if a Drupal environment opens up and we see a website, that means the patch applied. It does not tell us if the code is right. It doesn't do anything. But for first-time reviewers, if it's something like a documentation patch, you can review that documentation in the issue queue, for coding standards, right here. And make a comment, and then we know that it applied. So, so that's how you can use Simply Test Me without having a local environment. And after Marky's done, if we want to stick around and do a little bit more workshopping, that's cool too. So thank you, Marky.